All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. I see there's some there that have been waiting for this training for quite a while now. So this is going to be Report Builder, just the basic parts of it. We're not going to get into it's a pretty powerful tool. It allows you to do charts and maps and all kinds of things. I'll go over that stuff briefly.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
But what I really want to go over is how to set up a basic report from scratch. And there's a couple of parts to it, and we're going to go over those in pretty good detail. I'm launching Report Builder 3 from the desktop here, but this is the same Report Builder, same utility that you can access through GE if you have SQL Server 2008 or higher. Okay, so when you start up Report Builder, this is the first screen that you see. These are the fancy things that I was talking about before, the chart wizard and the maps. I didn't mean to click that. I wanted to briefly go over the maps here. I thought this is pretty cool. Select USA by state, and it gives you this map. Basically, what it allows you to do is overlay your data onto the map by state. You can also select the exploded and fixed individual states. Shows you the counties of it. Gives you some formatting capability. And again, we're not going to get into this part of it.
Hey,
That'll
Graham.
probably be next time. Yeah.
I don't think we can see your screen yet.
I'm sorry, say it again?
I don't think we can see your screen yet. We're over on the chat window, and it looks like everybody's only seeing your blue background. The welcome note.
Oh, sorry about that. How's that? Better?
See, it's tiny. Your desktop real tiny.
Real tiny?
Uh-huh.
Is your screen maximized?
It is.
Is that any different?
I can scroll to see your whole screen, but it still looks... Aha, I'm good now. I had to double-click the maximize button inside the chat window.
All right, so basically, I'm not going to get into this part of it, not in this session, because it's beyond the scope of what I wanted to cover here. Again, what I wanted to cover with this session is just how to make the basics of a report, how to make one from scratch from the very beginning. So, and get out of this. Back here. So this is what you see when you first start up Report Builder. We're going to start with a new report and just a regular blank report. This is what it gives you. It's already got a footer down here. It automatically puts the execution time in here. And so there's two basic parts to a report. There's the layout section, and then there's the data section. This big screen here where it says click to add title, that's the layout section. This window here on the left is the data section. For every report that you make, there's two items of data that you need to be concerned about. One is the data source, and one is the data set. Data source, it basically tells the report where it's going to go and get the information. And the data set defines what that information is going to be. And the data set is where you pull the fields from to actually put in the layout of the report. A couple more things about the layout. Up here at the top, you got the Insert tab. And it gives you the ability to add a whole bunch of different tools. Typically, a report would just be a table, standard table, but as you can see, you can get some pretty fancy stuff out of here. And all this charts and gauges and maps and all that, they work almost identically to what you would do in Excel if you wanted to add the same kind of tool. And then you got different text formatting and rectangles and all that over here. Here's where you control your header and footer. if you want it or don't. But like I said, normally most reports would just be a table, but we'll get to that in a minute. Going back to the data source and the data sets. Data source, again, is going to tell the report where it goes to get the data. So right-click on, we don't have one right now, so we're going to create one. Right-click on data sources, say add data source. And I always use a connection that's embedded in the report, just because that's what I'm familiar with. Almost all reports that you have are also embedded. And the connection type is always going to be SQL Server. And this part down here is going to tell it where to go. Let's say build. Got to refresh our list of servers. It might take a second. So at this point, what you would need to know is your SQL instance name and your database name. What we're looking for, I'm just going to open up SQL real quick to show you what we're looking for. Maybe not so quick. Okay, this is the instance name up here. We have two instances on this same server, but we're going to be using this one. This one's got our sample data, and there's the database name that we're going to be looking for. We've refreshed our list of servers. We'll scroll down to find the one that we're looking for. We don't have VM test in here for some reason. I'm not sure why it doesn't list it, but we'll just get rid of that part that we don't need. We come down here, and now we can see all the databases that are in that instance. Notice that this list over here is the same as this list over here. We're going to go with Grants 4.0. Test the connection. Good. And the advanced button down here is basically just if you want to set these things manually. But I just think it's easier to do it this way. So we tested the connection. Say OK. And then this is our connection string. That's what our data source is going to be made up of. Say OK. Let me minimize this. So now we have our data source. Next thing we need to do is create a data set. Again, it's embedded. And we'll select the data source. This is the one we just created. And we'll go down here and say Query Designer. Now we have available the full list of tables in GE. So if you remember from the last session that we had about creating queries, and the one before that, this is the same list that we were using before at that time. You've also got access to all the views and stored procedures, functions. The one thing that is I found that's limited as far as building your queries here is that when I go down here and select a table, let's start with grants. Okay, I expand the grants table, and it gives me all the different fields in that table. So I'll select a couple here. Right. Status. So what you can't do is connect tables, and I'm not sure why they don't allow that, but I'm going to show you a trick on how to get around that. And if you attended the advanced query session last time, this should be familiar to you. So I've got my very, very basic query for my report here, the data set, but I want to be able to get something from also, let's say, the payment table. And even though it lets me select stuff from the payment table and puts it in my list of fields, it doesn't actually join the way that I want it to join. I don't have that kind of power over it unless I have SQL experience enough to go in here and modify it. What I like to do, just so I can be sure that it's getting the data in the way that I want, is start up SQL, go to the grants table, open a new view. Just basically what we did in the last session. And pick my grant table like I did before. And I wanted something from the payment table. And to link to the payment table from the grants table, I need the grant fund table. Now I can get to the payment table. Alright, so here I have a lot more control over the query that is going to be the data set for my report. So I'll just reselect these fields that I had on the other one. And let's go over here and get check number and adjusted amount. And so what it did is basically created my query for me just by graphically hooking these things together down here in this section. So I can right click on that, copy it, go back into Report Builder, Query Designer, edit as text, get rid of all that, paste it in there. Now I just built a query that in Report Builder alone it wouldn't let you do that. So we had to borrow some power from SQL Server. So now we've got our data source and our data set. We've got nothing on our layout yet. Let's go with a table first off. Make it a little pretty. It just, by default, it adds 3 columns and 2 rows, one header, one body. But if you click on it, right click on the column, you can insert as many as you want. Let's go with, how many we got here? 6. Right. So once we've got our table in there, the next thing we have to do is tell the table, you can have, well, let me back up a little bit. A report can have as many data sets as it needs to get the information that you require. In this case, we've only got one, but in all cases, when you're using a table, you have to tell it which data set you want the data to come from. It's not smart enough to know that just because we have one data set, that should be it. So we've got to tell it. But to do that, click on the table till you get this the row and column headers. You right-click on this top corner box. Go to Tablix Properties. And this drop-down right here is the data set name that's going to give the information to the table. This is the data set that we just created. This is also where you can control how the page breaks work and whether or not it tries to group information on a single page or not. There's some visibility settings. Usually you don't just hide something. You know, it shouldn't be on the report if it's always going to be hidden. So you select this based on an expression. So you can tell it whether you want it to show based on a piece of information that is being pulled in by the data set or by a parameter. We haven't gone over parameters yet, but you can define the visibility status by any piece of data that's used in the report. So we're going to show this. And so at this point, we want to put our data into the table we just created. Right-click on one of these fields and say Expression. It brings up this expression window. Now, you've got a few different categories here. The built-in fields, let me move this a little bit. Built-in fields are, how do I explain this? I can't explain it as a group, but they're just things that you might want on a report, like page numbers, total number of pages, and the execution time, of course, the user that ran it, the actual report name, the folder that it's stored in, and all that. Parameters, we have, like I said, we haven't defined any yet, but we'll do that in a minute up here. And then the fields, this is specific to the data set that we just created. So we've got those 6 fields available to us. And again, what we're doing is selecting which one of the fields is going in this box of the report table. So let's go with grant number. Double click on it, say OK, and then it puts it in there. You can do it again. Go to fields, grant type. rid of this column here. Okay, so now if I run this right now, we're going to get every grant that's in our test database. And you run it with this button right up here. So there. Don't have too many, just about one page. But so now we want to be able to we want to define, let's say, we only want to see grants that are between $1,000 and $2,000. We'll go back to the design section here, and we're going to add a parameter. We right-click on the parameter, and we'll give it a name. Let's see. We'll add another one. Okay, let's make this integer. About float. Yeah, that's good. All right, so now we've got our two parameters, and we need to add them to our data set so that they're essentially going to be used as filters to control what data we get back. So to do that, easiest way, again, unless you know how to write this type of code here already, I would suggest the easiest way is to go back into SQL. This is the same query that we just built and moved over to our report. And for the amount here, what we're going to use our parameters for. So since we've got a range, we can use the between and since it's a parameter, we've got to have the @ symbol in front of it. In SQL, at this point, it's going to complain that you can't use parameters in this setting here, like that. That's not a problem. It'll still accept it. Now that we've changed it, I'm going to copy it back into Report Builder and paste it in there. So now we've got our parameters. Okay to accept it. Now when we run it, what we're going to see is an error. Oh, it's picky about the capitalization. I'm sorry. My computer's kind of slow right now. I'm going to do a little cleanup here. There we go. All right. So let's say our start amount is 1,000, end is 2,000, and over here we got the view report. So we didn't have this top bar here when we didn't have parameters. Once you start adding parameters to your report, you'll get this portion show up, and you have to click the view report button to get it to run. So now you can see that it's filtered out all of the grants that don't fall between the range that we've given. Anybody have any questions up till now? No? Okay. So the next thing that I wanted to go over is the page breaks. I don't really have enough data to effectively show it. I'm going to make the range of payments the complete range so that we can see them all, and hopefully it'll show us page break. Also add some header. And we'll run it again. Doesn't like that. Well, I didn't expect that. At the between. Well, something's just gone haywire. I don't know how to explain what it just showed us.
You did the page break before, so that's the data should be after.
Yeah, but it's not showing. It should show a scroll bar on this one. Yeah, okay, there we go. Did I click the before?
Yeah.
Okay. Didn't even notice. All right, there we go. All right, so also notice the other box that I checked to keep the all right, this repeat header columns on each page. That's the port header, I believe. Okay. So let's say report's a little bit more complex than this. And we want another table. You can have as many tables as you want. So this would be the case where we would need to have another data set. Again, we do the embedded data set. We can use the same data source for all of our data sets. Because remember, the data source is only telling the report where it's going to get the information. So it's got the entire GE database at its command at this point. Add a couple more things. I'm in trouble with this mouse. Let's not do that. Let's go back. Mouse is very, very sensitive. All right, so does anybody have any questions about, This is basically the same kind of reports that you all get when you give us a list of fields that you want, and this is exactly the process that we go through to create those for you. And like I said, that there's some fancy things that you can do to add color and add different fonts to it and the charts and all that. But that's basically everything you need to know to start creating reports. That is Basic Report Builder 101.
Hey, Graham.
Yes.
At the Hoedown conference, Matt Hale mentioned setting up either one or a couple data sets that would have every field in GE accessible and saving those. Is that something that's realistically possible with Report Builder 3 so that we don't need to interact with the SQL environment like you just did?
You could add every field to the data set, yeah. It would have to be done in SQL, but then it could be moved over as a data set here in Report Builder. I don't actually.
And it would live on, and we could have like just normal everyday staff or maybe support staff that don't need SQL access. They could go in, and I guess that's our vision would be not to need to interact with SQL daily to be able to make reports.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how feasible that would be to have. Well, every field would definitely be out of the question because there's stuff in there that you never use. It just like record indexes and things like that. So it certainly wouldn't be every field, but there definitely is a collection of fields that you would probably use pretty often. Like the ones that you'd see in the query section of GE. Payment information, fund information, recipients, payees, and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah, during the Report Builder session at the Hoedown, it sounded like Matt had something canned or had a technique that he used frequently.
Not for Report Builder 3, not that I'm aware of, because the difference between Report Builder 1 and Report Builder 3 is Report Builder 1 is model oriented. And that may have been what he's talking about. We have some models.
No, he was definitely demoing Report Builder 3, and he was discussing the joys of Report Builder 3.
The joys of it. It is a lot better than Report Builder 1. I'll tell you that. It's a lot more flexible.
Okay. I think you've got a bunch of other questions in the chat window, so I will be quiet.
I only have one screen, so I can't see the chat window unless I move away from it. Will a server name ever change? Only if you change it. Sometimes if you do a server migration or something, I personally think it's better just to leave things named the same, so you don't have to worry about going back into your existing reports and redoing the connection string for each one of them. So when you do a server migration or something like that, or it crashes or you get a new one for whatever reason, it's always best to stick with the same name. But in answer to your question, Joy, yes, it can change. Joy, can you hear me? Yes? Okay. How you want to start back over with how to build the data sources? Okay, no problem. In fact, let me save this here. We'll start over from the beginning. All right. We'll start with a new report. And again, well, let me show you how it's going to look when you very first start it up. Another question. Which wizard are you referring to, Hillary? Can you hear me, Hillary? Okay. Oh, okay. These wizards up here? I gotta. Yes. Okay. Let's go with. As far as getting back here, the only way that you can do it once you started a report, you'd have to select new. That's the only way. Unless there's one over here. Don't think that there is. Yep, there we go. So all these have it. I didn't notice that before. Thought it was just insert. So yeah, you can go to the wizards from the insert tab. And it would be the same, basically the same process as what we did before for the data source and the data set. Those parts you'll always have to do for a report. But you're not restricted to using a table, you know. So it can be a chart, or it can be one of these map things that I really want to know more about. So I just think that's cool. So getting back to creating data sources, again, I'll reiterate that there's two basic parts to the report. There's the layout portion and the data portion. And the data portion has data sources and data sets. The data source tells the report where it's going to go get information. The data set tells it what information it's getting. So to create the data source, you go over here on this pane, right-click on data source, add a new data source. Click the embedded radio button, and it's always going to be Microsoft SQL Server connection type. Now we got to go tell it where we want the data to come from. Got to refresh our server list. And again, this is the instance of SQL that we're interested in looking at, and in our case, it's VM Test 01. Mouse is giving me trouble. Okay, so we selected our SQL instance, and then we want to tell it which database we're going to. And in our case, it's Grants 4.0. The test connection. If you sometimes you'll have a problem with the test connection if it's usually the particular user's permission settings, some kind of a security issue. And you would have to go into SQL at that point and give this user permission to access the database. So if you don't get this succeeded test connection, then that would be your next stop to go and see what's wrong. Click OK, and what we just did created our connection string for us. And we click OK again, and there's our new data source. Now we're going to use that data source to create our data set. We're going to right-click on data set. We're going to use embedded again. Select our data source that we want to take from. Query Designer. And then these are all the tables in our GE database. You just expand one. See the columns in it. You checkbox, add them to your query. And Joy, if you're interested in looking at this again, we are recording this. So we're going to post it on SharePoint afterwards, so you can access it anytime you want. So at that point, once we've created our data source and data set, we can go back and focus on the layout and decide how we want data to be displayed, in what order. And just like queries, this data set that we just made, you can have filters on it, you can group. There are functions like sum and count. So if you wanted to know, for instance, the amount that's been granted to a particular recipient over a period of time, you can do that just the same way as you would with queries here in this data set. Essentially the same thing, only it presents it differently. Anybody else have any questions? I was certain there would be more questions, so that was all that I planned on going over. Does anybody here have still using Report Builder 1? Parameters again? Sure. Okay, I'm gonna Hillary. You can do. Are you using? You still have Report Builder 3 though, right? Yeah, 3 is a whole lot better. It's Report Builder 3 is a lot more like the other report building tool that we use, well, that I use to create reports. It's called Report Designer. It's not quite as powerful, but it's very similar. I was going to say that with your old Report Builder 1 reports, they can be imported into Report Builder 3.
Hey, Graham.
Yes.
This is Jason from San Antonio. Hey, I was just taking a look at our install. I think we're still on GE 3.8, and we still have Report Builder 1. To get 3.0, what do we need to do?
You can. I'm going at the end of this. I'm going to send out a link that's got. It tells you how to get download the Report Builder 3 files.
Okay.
Real
okay.
simple, real quick. It's just pretty much a one-click kind of installation, and it can be standalone.
All right.
And it's free, so I'll send that out to you.
Great. Thanks a lot.
No, they'll run side by side. They won't conflict with each other.
Okay. Good.
If you wanted to keep one for some reason.
All right.
But like I said, if you've got reports that were built in 1 that are model based, you can import them into version 3.
Okay.
We do.
All right, we're gonna go look at the parameters again. The parameters, basically, they're user definable filters. Like on that other report that we were working on a minute ago, we had start amount and end amount. We essentially just use those as filters. So you right click on it, we'll add a parameter. We don't have anything in here, but I'll kind of go over in more detail some of these options here. Let's say that you're interested in finding only certain grant types. Let's go ahead and add another data set. And this data set, still going to use data source 1. And basically what I'm doing here is I'm going to make a query that's going to allow us to have a parameter with a drop down so that you can select the grant types that you want and filter the report that way. So essentially what I need is just grant type. I'll go ahead and edit it as text. And I don't want to see every grant type for every grant. I just want to see each unique grant type. We'll put distinct in here. We went over that in the the query builder or query session that we did a month ago. So distinct just brings in, like, we'll have dozens and dozens of grants that are donor advised, but we only want to see donor advised in this list once. So putting distinct in here in the query only brings back the unique one. Alright, so here's our second data set. And we'll go up here and we'll add our parameter. Call it grant type. So at this point, if I just clicked OK, it would add our parameter, and then when we ran the report, you would have to type in whatever grant type that you wanted to see on the report. And on top of that, it would only allow you to do one at a time. So the reason we built this data set here to pull back all the unique grant types is because we're going to use it in this parameter. And we'll go here to the available values section, and you can specify values or you can get values from a query. There's our query. So click on that, and we'll select dataset 2, and the value field, in this case we've only got the one value, the grant type, but when you're working with, say, funds, the value field usually would be the fund ID, which is what you don't see that unless you dig around in the database. That's really the only place you'd see it. What you see on the records in GE is the fund number. So typically what I would do is use the fund ID as the value and the fund number that you're familiar with as the label. But in this case, we've only got the one, so which is all right. We select grant type for the value, grant type for the label. Again, there's default kind of options here, and the advanced is beyond the scope of this session. We got that set up. Say OK. Now that we've got our parameter, we've got to go back into not this data set. We've got to go into this data set and add that, as our filter. Edit as text. There. For parameters, remember you have to put the @ symbol in front of it. That's what makes them distinct. And spelling. Capitalization is important. Alright, so there we've got our filter in. We'll go view the report. Now I've got this drop down, gone through the entire grant table, and selected each unique grant type. So we don't see, 10,000 of these, it's just one for each. And my computer keeps falling on me. Let's select DA, view the report. Got none. Oh, one other thing. Notice in this drop-down list, it still only allows you to select one at a time. Go back to design. Go right-click on this parameter that we just made. Parameter properties. This checkbox here, allow multiple values, will create it so that got these checkboxes here so you can select multiple values, all, none, or somewhere in between. Yeah, Leslie is helpful about tables and views. I taught her everything she knows. We pull tables from RE and FE. Actually, yes, you can. To do that, when we created our data source here, told the report where it's going to go get the data. And you can have multiple data sources too, so let's go ahead and add another one. The embedded, always SQL Server, build. When we selected our SQL instance name from this list, it didn't just give us GE-related databases. Notice here we've got BB and C, our FE sample data, all kinds of versions of grants. So it's not restricted to just grants. You can have it look at any database you want. The only thing is that it can only look at one at a time. Well, each data source can look at only one at a time. So we can have, we'll make this one RE. Action. Okay. So now we have a second data source where the first one is getting data from our GE database and the second one is getting data from our RE database. So at this point you can go and create another data set and tell it that we want to use data source 2. Now we have access guess we don't have much of a, there we go. Now we've got access to all the RE tables and all the fields in each one of those tables. Yeah, it doesn't restrict you. At this point, once you've selected whichever fields you want, and I don't have a table here. Let me put a table in real quick. If we created a data set 3 here that was not pulling from data source 1, but instead data source 2, which is our RE one, when we go over here to tell the table which data set we're going to be pulling from, and we can pull it from our RE data set. How's that? Definitely more powerful than Report Builder 1 and just general queries. Anybody else have any other questions? Well then, I guess I'll wrap this up, and we'll be posting this to the SharePoint site probably tomorrow morning, and I'll also send out that supplementary file to let you know where to get Report Builder 3 if you don't have it, how to install it, and it also is on there that it has links to getting further information about it. It doesn't actually have a manual, but it points you in the direction of one. You have access to FE but not RE. Is that a security issue with our own server? I mean, through GE, Hillary? You can't connect to RE from within GE? Oh. Possible that it's on a different instance. It would be unusual for that to be, but it's possible. There's no permission settings in Report Builder itself that would restrict you from seeing a database. The only thing I can think is that maybe a different server instance, but it's certainly possible that it could be some permission issue. Would be, in the SQL security settings. Would be where I'd go to look. Excellent. So if you want to go over it again, like I said, we're going to post this on the SharePoint, and feel free to go in there and check it out anytime you want. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll be here for a while.